edition of Conversation with First Baptist Church. I'm Larry Dixon, and with me today is Dan Mason. Dan, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Larry. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I've got some questions for you.
All right.
So tell me about where you grew up and what life was like as a little boy.
I grew up in a little town called Shepherdstown, West Virginia. It's in the far end of the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. When I grew up, it was a little farming community. There is a college there where I went to school. It's now called Shepherd University. It was Shepherd College in those days, but it's a town of about 1,000 people. Since I left, it's more like a suburb of Washington and Baltimore now, and it's a little touristy town full of little boutiques and restaurants, and people from the big city come in every weekend and check it out. But it was a great place to grow up. I tell people I was like a free-range kid. Back in those days, before there was a whole lot of crime and everything, we could just ride our bikes and walk around town, and if you got in trouble, everybody's parents knew who you belonged to, and your parents would soon find out. So it was a really nice place to grow up.
Wow. So, as a little boy, what was your dream job?
First, it was to be a radio DJ because I love listening to music on the radio. I soon found out they didn't make much money and there weren't many jobs in it. And then, of course, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, and I wasn't any good at sports, so that didn't work out either. Eventually, when I got to college, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. I was always kind of fascinated with it, and my mom got jury duty once, and it was for a murder trial. And I went with her, and she didn't get picked, but we sat and watched the trial anyway, so I was pretty fascinated with that. So I eventually ended up going to law school. Never did criminal law, but I still had a career as a lawyer.
Well, where did you go to law school?
Washington Lee University in Lexington, Virginia.
Oh. So you didn't do criminal law?
No, I worked for Legal Aid of the Bluegrass my whole career for 38 years. And I retired about 2 months ago.
That was my next question.
Yes. We did only civil cases it was free for low-income people there. So it was a really satisfying career. I really enjoyed it.
So what brought you to Moorhead, Kentucky?
It was the job. When I went to law school in Virginia. I was from West Virginia, and I applied for jobs, those states and states bordering there. I read an article that was probably in the Village Voice or one of some newspaper I saw in college about these legal aid lawyers in New York City making $13,000 a year, and I thought, well, that sounds pretty good. The pay wasn't, but it just sounded like something I really wanted to do. So I applied, and I got this job here, and ended up staying, till now, probably the rest of my life.
Well, so what's your hobby?
Probably, I'd say music. Love to listen to music. Before the pandemic anyway, I went to hopefully again, went to a lot of concerts, a lot of bluegrass festivals. I play guitar some. I'm not that great at it, but I've played in a couple of bluegrass bands over the years, and I haven't played much since the pandemic, but I hope to get back into it pretty soon. But yeah, I'd say, mostly music. I like to watch sports a lot too. Go to a lot of ball games and watch sports on TV.
Well, maybe you could hook up with Thomas Albert and start your own band.
I've played with Thomas some, and he is way out of my league. Thomas is just an amazing musician.
He's my neighbor across the street, and I love it when he plays that steel guitar.
Oh, yeah.
With the windows open.
Ah, yes.
Yes. What would be your go-to meal?
Crab cakes, Maryland crab cakes. My mom grew up in Baltimore, and where I grew up, it was about an hour and a half from Baltimore. And Maryland crab cakes are just the best thing ever. My mom would make it, and she wouldn't go for the stuff pretty much anywhere west of there because it just wasn't the same. But she would make really great ones, and it's just, when I go home, that's what I get. So.
Well, everybody needs a go-to meal.
Yes.
I had the opportunity to have Maryland crab cakes. A friend of mine, we were going to some training. His family was from Maryland. Mm-hmm. And there was this little shack was out over the water. And the boat would pull up and they would unload. That's about as fresh as you can get.
It's the best. We went on vacation to Ocean City, Maryland this summer, and you get the best there. So we had a lot of it.
So what's on your bucket list?
Travel. Especially national parks. I think in particular the Grand Canyon. I've never been there. I've only been to 2 national parks in my life, I think. Joshua Tree, which is beautiful, and of course the Great Smoky Mountains. And I like to go to Europe too. I've never been there.
Which country?
Probably England first of all, because that's, one country where I kind of have my roots, and it's, the root of America, and I'm sure there's a lot of really beautiful places there, but, a lot of countries there I'd like to see.
I'd like to see Ireland or Scotland.
Yeah.
That's kind of where my roots are, from that part of the world. What brought you to First Baptist Church?
I got married to Louise, my wife. We got married December 14th, 2019. Before we were married, I'm a lifelong Methodist, and I'm really stuck in my ways. And when I moved to Moorhead, I started going to the Methodist church. But when Louise and I started seriously dating, we thought, thinking about marriage, we would go here some and there some, and I thought maybe we could alternate, but I like this church so much. I just thought this is more in line with the things I believe and what I like, and Louise is very active here, and I just thought this is the place for me. So this is where I need to go.
Well, you answered the next question, is why you've stayed.
Yeah, well, that plus the fact that this church is everybody says this, but it's true. This church is very inclusive. I don't feel like anybody gets condemned for their lifestyle or anything else like that, and we welcome people of all races, economic backgrounds, sexual orientation, just everything like that. It's just a really loving, nice place.
Of all the characters in the Bible, who would you like to spend the day with?
I would say Paul. Paul did some terrible, terrible things before God got a hold of him. And then once he really kind of met God on the road to Emmaus, God used him. And even though he did terrible things, he used him to pretty much change the world. And he went through a lot of things that would have made him doubt his faith, like shipwrecks and chained up in prison, and he came out of it all and still stayed faithful and just brought a lot of people to Christ.
Wow. No one no one has mentioned they wanted to spend the day with Noah. Perhaps bad weather was not on their list of things to do.
Guess not. Paul had some bad weather too with the shipwrecks.
How has First Baptist Church impacted your life?
Well, it's given me a church that I don't mean to say anything bad about another church, but other churches I've been to, there's been some things that I've heard from the pulpit that I really did not agree with and didn't feel comfortable with, and here everything just seems right in line with what I believe, and it's just been an inspiration, I think.
It's unique to find a place like this that everyone's welcome.
Right, that's the thing.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'm hoping to live a long, healthy life. My dad is 95 years old, and he lives in a big 2-story house back in West Virginia all by himself. My sister lives a mile away and helps a lot, but his health is really good for a 95-year-old, and I just hope that's me one day. So, yeah.
How often do you get to go visit him?
Hopefully it'll be more now that I'm retired, but it's usually 3 or 4 times a year. It's in West Virginia, but it's still about a 7-8 hour drive. It was hard for Louise and I both to get away with work, but now that I'm retired, it'll be a lot easier to get there.
This has been a conversation with First Baptist Church. I'm Larry Dixon, and with me today has been Dan Mason. Dan, it has been a pleasure.
Thanks, Larry. It's been a pleasure.